Okay, I think we're gonna get going. It is so brilliant to see so many people from years gone by, and lots of new people too. We love that mix. A really really warm welcome on what was a super cold winter's night. A lot of us I know have just got back from Web Summit, which we've now called Wet Summit because it poured rain the entire time. And I know a lot of you have gone over to Slush, but we do have still a lot of people here. I'm really, really glad to have you all here. This session is going to be super interactive because they are the best sessions we've worked out here at Generate. So please do, as Jay talks you through his journey, please do think about questions. You might have already brought some along, which is absolutely fine. And after I throw him a few questions, we're going to open it up to the house. So please do get involved. And then afterwards, there's going to be some networking. We've got some wine, some snacks, and I hope you have a great evening. Just to introduce myself very quickly, I am LJ Silverman and I run LSE Generate, which hopefully by now you've realised is the school's entrepreneurship centre. And our aim is really to support students and alumni, a lot of who I know are here today, build and scale impact-driven businesses. So we've got our campus here in London, where you are now, and 22 international chapters. We're about to launch our 23rd in South Africa, 24th in Madrid next year as well. And so we'd love for you to get involved in whatever way you want, whether it's you need a mentor, you want to be a mentor, you want to join one of our programs, you want to go on a retreat, you want to tell us about a new chapter we should be opening in your hometown. All of that is absolutely up for grabs. So please do grab me or one of the team afterwards. Okay, this is going to be a really exciting session. We've been talking to Jay for quite a few years now, and I know a lot of you in the audience know him as well. I can spot some faces. So Jay is a serial entrepreneur. My 14-year-old daughter is actually here today, and I have a feeling, my hunch is that she came because she thought it was a breakfast cereal entrepreneur, and she quite likes them. But as most of you will know here, that is not the case. Highly successful. Jay's been working for everything from health, insurance, transport, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about that today. I'm going to get him to introduce himself in 2 minutes, because he will do that best, and then we'll get going with the questions. Any questions before we start? Any boring household things that I've forgotten? If there is a fire, just run out that door and you should be fine. Okay, Jay, over to you. Thanks so much.
Very nice to meet you, or to see you again, LJ. Thank you for the great introduction. I'm hoping if I do well, I can get promoted to South Africa or Madrid. After being in London for a really cold day. So I'm Jay. I have been an entrepreneur for 20 years, my entire career, really, as I was graduating LSE and a master's degree. And we'll get into the individual companies in a minute, but built and sold 2 companies in the mobility space in the UK, then went back after 12 years to the US, started an insurance company. It will all make sense when I explain it. And then sold that to a much bigger insurance company. And then just a couple months ago, started and funded a new business called Andel that is trying to lower the cost of brand drugs in America and beyond. The most ambitious thing that I've done by far.
Brilliant. Thank you. That was 1 minute. Well done. It's going to go well. We'll be finished in about 10 minutes. Okay. So I want to, before we go into the incredible businesses that you have built and sold, and just to start with your time at LSE, given that we are here and all of you or most of you are LSE students or alum, how did your time at LSE shape not only what you ended up building, but also how you think about problems, how you think about power, how you think about systems?
Well, I came to LSE because when I graduated Dartmouth in 2001 with a philosophy degree and therefore no real job prospects, I was trying to get a job in tech, and I got one at the Lime Group, which nobody remembers anymore, but they had a product called LimeWire. It was awesome and file sharing. Anyway, 2001 happened and the world fell apart and everybody got their jobs rescinded and nobody really knew what to do. And I had spent a semester at Oxford, so I knew England, and I figured, well, look, I'll go over to the UK for a while and then, see what happens. So it wasn't really that planned out. I decided to do a master's degree in media and communications, regulation and policy. Again, because I was trying to prepare for my life as, I don't know, a broadcaster, a media lawyer, entrepreneur, anything but an entrepreneur. And, but while I was here, I had to do a couple of things I think that were very interesting. Well, one is met an incredibly diverse international cast of characters that would come back as either investors or friends or supporters in my businesses later in life. So that was one thing. The second is they made me take statistics. I don't know why I keep thinking about this, but every time I come back here, I took master's level statistics. And this is somebody who really never had taken much math in my entire life. And just the rigor of having to do something like that stuck with me forever. When you think about probability and you think about risk and you think about certainty and all of these other things. So that's kind of what I came out of LSE with, but also I took a summer school course, which was affiliated with LSE, and it was run by a professor who now is at Babson, which is a great college in the U.S. for entrepreneurship, called Jeff Shea. We're still in touch. And he taught basically of how to be an entrepreneur in a couple of weeks. And I just loved it. I was so enthralled. I said to myself, I was going to be the guy that went back to that class and spoke to it about the business that I had built based on all of those things. And so, during the class, got an idea with a friend of mine who was a shipbroker at a local firm doing 20 or 30 same-day courier deliveries a day, pulling his hair out. And he had this idea that we could create a better, more automated same-day delivery service. Now, this was 2004, so there was no iPhone. There was, certainly, there was really nothing like it, right? No Android. This was just Windows mobile technology, kind of the very, very early days of what you could do. And I don't want to get too much into it because I want to steer the questions, but that business became eCourier. We weren't as inventive with the names, I think, in the beginning, but it did the job. And we came up with this idea that we would give all the couriers handheld computers with GPS, which we had to literally bolt on to these devices. It was kind of, it was really early days, and they didn't work half the time. But then we built this auto scheduling algorithm that would automatically allocate each incoming job to the appropriate courier in real time, and then have the clients who were, big banks or Harrods or, other kind of media firms be able to actually track their courier on a screen live, just like we wanted to do when we were tracking our own couriers. And so that model was extremely successful. Clients loved it. It moved the market forward tremendously. Would I have done it again? Well, it was fun, and it was definitely, I learned an awful lot. But what I should have done before that, and you should do as well, is to just check the market size before you go into a business like that you think is going to be venture funded or venture fundable, because it was probably $400 million in London, and maybe some other cities added up. It could have been a couple billion around the world. That's way too small to build anything like a big venture funded business, just given all of the odds that you have to overcome to be able to get there, and what slice of the market that you're generally going to achieve. So even though the business was successful and it was sold and it did what it said it would do, and it survived 2008, which I can go into in a bit, I really felt like, going back, had I only identified that, we probably would have picked a different sector, and maybe that would have been a better outcome. But at the same time, I was so young, in my 20s, and you just had to do it, and we got it done. So we learned how to build stuff, and there was something to that maybe I just had to learn.
Great. Thank you. It's really interesting because we have this ongoing kind of tension sometimes at LSE where we discuss, can you teach entrepreneurship, or is it more the kind of practice? But it sounds like you were super inspired by this teacher, and that was actually what got you going. So I'd be interested to hear about your theory about that. Is it a kind of a mashup of both the practical side and the theory?
I'm going to send this to Jeff afterwards, and he's going to flip out. But anyway,
hi Jeff. And then I wanted to also touch on what you were saying about the market size, and you were young, and so you went for it. But Generate, a lot of the businesses are very early stage. That's our sweet spot. So can you talk us through the difference between an idea being quite interesting and one that is highly likely to be commercially successful, apart from the points that you've just mentioned?
Yeah, I think that's really difficult. But what I can talk about is kind of the general market dynamics that you want to see when you're building a business. So, ideally you want at least 10 billion, ideally 100 billion plus market, opportunity. And ideally, it's an existing market opportunity and not one that has to be developed and so has risk that it may or may not pan out that way. So, I did drones later in my life, and basically that market just didn't pan out. And so that was problematic at the time. The other one is consolidation, right? If there are one or two or three players, Facebook, Meta, uh, and Google, whatever, that are controlling your market, it's going to be very difficult for you as an entering company, very expensive to crack into that. So unless there is something fundamentally changing in the market in your favor, I think those kind of market dynamics are very difficult also to execute in. So I think starting with the market is a good exercise because it will rule out so many things. But at the same time, you're going to wind up with something that just isn't perfect. Either it's a little too small or it's a little too consolidated, and you're just going to have to take a bet that you can change it or that it will change. And in my experience, the businesses that work best are the ones where you can anticipate a little bit of really tectonic, systemic market change happening that you as the new entrant are going to be able to really execute on far before the people in the market. And if you can do that and you're right, then there can be an immense payoff. If you're wrong, well, it's okay. You got to go do something else, which is, by the way, there's no shame in that, right? Like, this is a high risk business. We all have to recognize that sometimes it just won't work and we got to do something else. And some of the best businesses out there have probably been built thinking they were going to do A, but actually done B. I mean, Slack was like a game when it started that was entirely unsuccessful. And then they say, well, let's build this messaging thing.
That's our favorite subject, failure. So we're going to touch on that now. And we've always said failure is a great market research, and you've kind of confirmed that. Can you tell us about a failure that fundamentally changed your worldview? So not just your kind of strategy, but the way that you look at the world of entrepreneurship, maybe the way that you build businesses.
Yeah. So I think the one that really comes to mind more than anything is the Halo example in London, right? So Halo was incredibly successful in record time, doing what nobody thought was possible, which was connecting all of the London black taxi drivers onto one single technology platform. I mean, it was just outrageous how quickly it happened and how popular it was. The only problem with that is that there are only about 25,000 London black taxi drivers. And that wouldn't necessarily have been a problem if we could just spill over into other kinds of cars or things like that. But the fact is that, the London taxi drivers don't like to work with the private hire sector, a section of the market, or Uber or whatever. And so you sort of had to pick a side, right? And if you were on the wrong side, you had to stick to that side and maybe go elsewhere. But so anyway, the lesson there is, in a two-sided marketplace, you really have to focus on the supply side first and make sure that there is some reasonable path to infinite supply, because you never know how much demand you're going to get. And ideally, you should get, an infinite amount of it, right? And you don't ever want to be stuck in a situation where you don't have enough stuff to sell them. You don't have enough, taxis to give them. You don't have enough drugs to provide. So anyway, that's I think the biggest thing that I learned there.
Great, thank you. And just sticking with failure for a second, has there been a moment when, because it sounds like you've had enormous success, when that success kind of blinds you more than failure ever did? And how did you deal with that?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question. I think in the beginning, when you first start out creating these businesses, it is so incredible to get to a seed round. It's even more incredible to get to a Series A round, look, statistically, right? And then to a Series B and Series C. So when you've got like $30 or $40 million in the bank and people are saying, wow, this business is going great, it's amazing, et cetera, it's actually quite a dangerous time, because you really get fooled into smoking your own dope a little bit about how great everything's going and how the business is doing. And so what I try and do now is be a little bit more critical at every stage of, things are going great, but let's take a look at how things really are and how do we get to the next stage. It is incredibly easy to spend $30 million or $40 million or $50 million or $200 million. You see it every single day in this business. So I just think the lesson there is, don't get carried away.
Thank you. And if we can, you've got a question. Shall we let him?
Yeah.
Go, Brett.
Okay. My question is, when you were starting out, you had all these projects, and I guess there are some failures that there are great failures like that are more that could be very painful. And would you say how many times did you have these expectations that were not met, and a feeling of failing and hurt, and until it gets to something that works?
So there is a process that I follow, and I have followed for many, many years, which I think everybody else should follow as well, which is this kind of customer discovery, product discovery process, idea discovery process. So you're trying to figure out what you're going to do next, and you're trying to figure out what the idea should be, whether people will buy it, stress test it a little bit, etc. Now, because of financial constraints, sometimes you don't have a lot of cash. And so basically, sometimes you got to cut corners and basically just do a little bit of the exercise. And that's okay, right? You do the best that you can. But, it's always good to be able to at least present what you're trying to do to a buyer and ask them, will they buy it? So I can remember very clearly, in between eCourier and Halo, I had this idea that I was going to create this software as a service platform for courier services around the world, right? And it was going to be great. It was going to have all of better than eCourier technology, and it was going to unite all these together in a massive network. And I remember I started calling courier companies in New York, and I started to ask them about their systems, and they said, "Oh yeah, they're terrible. But it's all right. It's not a big deal." And I said, "If it was free, would you buy it from me?" And the guy said, "No." And I hung up the phone and I said, "Okay, time to do something else." And that was where I was like, okay, my plan B on the list was, let's do something with the taxi market. And that's how that came into play. I guess my point here is that particular time to me, which just recently happened to me over the last kind of couple of years, is just the most harrowing, because you're going around, you get excited about something, you do more research into it, and you start calling people, and you get some people who say, maybe it's a good idea, and then something happens and you just realize that it's just not going to work, and you have to let go of it. And it just hurts so much, because what are you going to do now, right? You're back to square one. You're going to be walking around it's a terrible time in my opinion, but also it's a lot better than the alternative, which is you figure something out, you have this idea, you start executing on it, you raise money, and then you run into a wall. It's just much harder to move around and to maneuver when you've got employees and a business and all this other stuff, if you can even get that far. And many people can't. Many people try and raise money for years and can't do it. So I guess the lesson here is you got to figure out what you want to do, but you also got to figure out what is going to work and double down on that.
How long would you do?
So in this case, at least a year. Ideally, if you have the money, right? So a lot of times I didn't have the money, and a lot of people don't, right? They can't just sit around for a year not doing anything. So a couple of months at least, but enough so that at least by the time you say, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to get people in, you have spoken to people who are going to go into their pocket, take their money out, and buy your product. Now, it's a mythical product, of course, at that point, but they've at least told you, hey, if you build this, I would seriously consider buying it, or I buy it and this is what I pay for it, et cetera. I think that's really the mainstay of what you're trying to figure out. If the answer to that question is no, there's just no way that you're going to build anything, no matter what, no matter how good the product is.
Great. Keep them coming. Pop your hand up if you have got questions, and we'll come to you in a sec. So just touching on that and that kind of notion of repeated entrepreneurship. So a lot of entrepreneurs, they sell and they foot it over to Miami and buy their big penthouse. Well, where do people go these days? Miami? But they go and they settle down and they retire at whatever age it might be. What is it that compels you to keep building? Is it dissatisfaction? Is it curiosity? Is it ambition? Or is it something else entirely?
To me, retirement is very scary. The idea of actually having nothing to do and infinite money and everything else is like, I tell you, I had nightmares about it. I know maybe I shouldn't. Most people don't. Maybe it's privilege for me to say that, but you know, I like to build things, and building things involves risk, and it involves basically, you know, uncertainty. And so, to me, the greatest thing is to pull a group of people together in this Ocean's 11 style heist. How can we do this? It's totally impossible, but if we work together and people play their position, we might actually be able to do it. That's like retirement for me. And so, how I know it's very difficult, and it's probably not something for the faint of heart, but it's really what I like to do best.
So I guess it's, would you say it's an identity then? Or is it a calling, a skill set? How would you define it if you go out?
I mean, look, so I think it's sort of like, the life track. Yeah. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. But yeah, but I think if you're a craftsman, right? Do craftsmen ever really retire from their craft? I don't know. I don't know many of them that do. They always find a way to work it into their life. So I think of it that way.
Great. Thank you. Yes, Akbar.
Hi, very nice to see you.
Good to see you. Just to push a little bit further, say when you're in the area of you're about to be acquired, or you get an offer by one of your companies, how do you know the price is right? Is it a case of you have like a threshold in your head? The deal will just go right.
Yeah, I mean, most of this is driven by a couple of factors, right? One is, what is the market doing externally? So if the market is super hot for what you're doing, and you're very confident that you're going to be able to raise further money and everything's going to go great, then, you can pretty much say no as many times as you want to anybody and then see what the market will bear. But most of the time, you can't really see that, and you never know how markets are going to react, and maybe the economy goes south and there's a recession or something like that. So, do you want to pin everybody, not just your life, but everybody else's life and wealth on that decision? So, look, I think it's really down to what the optimal pricing you can get in that situation, and then what the alternative is, and then try and see if one is substantially better than the other. In a lot of cases, at least me talking to other entrepreneurs, right, the reason people take these deals is because there is immense uncertainty in continuing on for just so many different reasons. Will we continue to get funding? Will the IPO market be open for us? For how long? So that's why I think it is the certainty of closure versus the uncertainty of continuation.
Yeah. Great, thanks, and thanks, Akbar. And so maybe if we just stay on that subject of kind of investment and funding, and maybe stick with Andel for now, although you don't have to if you don't want to. Just a question around investors. Is there anything that they saw in that business that you didn't? And if so, what was that?
Well, I think this was the first real business that I had been in that, people were reacting a lot more to me personally than they were necessarily to the subject matter, which I find very unusual, and I kind of ignored, I guess. But I guess it makes sense, right? Like, there's so much risk in these things, particularly at the seed stage. How else do you compensate for that? But I also think that people look at the level and depth of the analysis that you've done. They look at, how you're pitching the product, your passion about it. And also, is it something that they happen to know anything about? So, we found success in Andel's financing with people that I had known before. So Seed Camp, Patent Street Ventures, both great. But also people that were deep into healthcare, and they understood the dynamics of the market, and they knew things were changing. We went to like a gazillion generalist funds, right? Like that were basically, kind of the ones I'd gone to before, and people just kind of looked at us and were like, we don't understand, like, what is this? What's a PBM? And they're like, what is this market? So maybe the business was too specific for, for those, although, they'll come around.
And maybe just before we throw out questions, often a question that comes up is what advice would you give to early stage founders? I want to kind of flip that and ask what kind of advice for early stage founders do you wish would stop being suggested?
I think people are putting too many barriers in between you guys actually going for it and not. And I think what you have to recognize is that this is not like one shot. And if you don't make it, your whole life is screwed, right? This is one shot in a potential series of career moves that will get you to potentially where you want to go. So there's, especially at your age, most of you, I think, my advice would be, even if it doesn't feel perfect, even if your co-founder isn't 100%, you don't have an engineering team, you've never built a product before, just do it. Because the worst that can happen is you're going to learn a ton about how to build a business, how to build a team, how to build products, and you'll be able to leverage that into almost anything else that you want to do in your life and career, especially doing it again. And I think also, people have a lot of respect for multi-time founders. They don't necessarily care how it ends up. They know that this is a high-risk endeavor. And so what they want to see is that you got back on your feet. What did you learn from it? And that's that. So I don't care how bad the idea is, but it would be much better if you guys would take the jump rather than going to some bank or, I don't know what people do these days, consulting, for a big tech company. You're taking that plunge. The further you go in your life, unless you've really done it a million times, those opportunities may close for you. It just may be practically impossible for you to take your life at a certain point and drop everything to make, I don't know, $100,000 a year or less, or maybe for a long time to do what you want to do. So now, what's the worst that could happen?
Mm. It's interesting because we have these global hubs where we support alumni, and I have a feeling that kind of approach is a much more US approach than it is maybe in the UK and Europe. Do you notice those differences, and how do they play out?
Yeah, so I noticed this when I was in the UK, and this is part of the reason I would advise anybody who's serious about entrepreneurship to move to the US as quickly as possible. I know this is not a politically correct statement, and I know it's not. There are kind of problems with the US. You look at the insolvency laws, right, in the UK and in Europe, right? So insolvency laws in the UK and Europe generally bar directors that have been involved in insolvencies, with some exceptions, from being directors of other companies. So it's like really serious stuff. The amount of bankruptcies, I mean, I could use some examples of, senior government officials, but even beyond that, the amount of bankruptcies that many entrepreneurs have had in America is, 10, 20, I don't know, like things just go wrong all the time, and that's considered absolutely okay. I think the UK is getting better in this regard, but what the US has is the combination of that, hey, do it, try it, we respect you for trying, plus we've got the biggest homogenous market in the entire world, so it gives you the best odds of success. Plus, that means we've got the most capital, et cetera, et cetera. I sound like I'm like a poster child for the U.S., but really, that's I think a lesson I learned. Everyone talks in Europe about, like Europe is, it's fantastic, and we can beat the Americans, and this can be the greatest, entrepreneurship place in the world. I've been hearing this stuff for 20 years, but the reality of it is, if you have the opportunity to move to the biggest, richest homogenous place in the world that you can sell whatever it is to people, that has more money coming in the door, your odds of success will be substantially better, and the outcome is likely to be substantially bigger. So why wouldn't you do that, right? You're already operating under so many constraints in the first place. I hope I don't get banned from coming back for that or yeah.
Jay Bregman cancel LSE. Okay, questions. Yes, at the back over there. Yeah.
How would you compare the first time you fundraised to the last one? Is there any key information that would have helped you negotiate better?
So I'm going to go with the commonalities first. So I left a job working for an S&P 500 company that acquired my company that I could have stayed in for 10 years, right? And it was a great job. And I loved the people there. and I was working with my own team, and they left me alone. I mean, it was great. And you know, my girlfriend did not want me to leave, right, at all. And so when I said, okay, well, so I'm going to start this new thing, et cetera, I came back to her after a couple of months and complained about the fundraising is not going well. These guys don't understand it. I'm going to all these people, you know, and basically, you know, the response was, this is what you wanted. So I think the idea is that actually the dynamic of the fundraise, which is, oh my God, it's not working. Yeah, we got some of these, you know, some early traction, but can we keep them in the round while we're still getting? It's almost exactly the same all the time. And the idea, like, I'm funding it, and I don't even know what's going to happen if, you know, we can't meet the next month's expenses or whatever. What is different though is when you do get hits, I think you can negotiate much better because you understand how to play the dynamics a little better, and you don't get into this frame of mind where, oh my God, I've been through such a disaster with this. I'm just going to take the first deal and wrap it up because God forbid that it goes away. You can sort of push, you know, where to push a little bit harder to get the terms that you want, and how to play those terms and how to get a deal hot, and then basically, you know, to raise the price or whatever it is you want to do. But ultimately, you're going to be subject to the market. It's a market. And for any given business at any given time in any given sector, you're going to get what the market's going to deliver to you. And you can't really beat the market. So that's the other commonality, I suppose.
Yes. At the back. Thank you.
Let's see another startup where you wanted to be your first follower. Ever saw an idea where you said, oh, well, that should have been my idea, instead of owning yourself?
So how do I say this? So Halo, I don't believe, was a fast follower. You know, Uber was only in San Francisco. It was very unclear how that model was going to work out. So I really hate these UK and European businesses that basically say, oh, wow, so somebody's doing food delivery in the US. Let's take the model and export it to here, right? And there are people who've gotten very rich off of this. So I can't fault them. It's not terrible. But it's just like, you know, I do this because of the business model innovation, right? Like the fact that we're going to create a better way of doing whatever it is. And I think if you're a fast follower, it's very difficult for you to ever be in the position where you're really innovating, you know, truly innovating anyway. So I would not advise people to copy business models. I would advise you to spend the time and develop them for yourself.
Wow. My goodness. Yes.
I'm curious about the innovation piece, because your businesses are all really different from each other. Where are you getting those ideas from?
Yeah, so I guess I'm a little bit unique in that there are some entrepreneurs who go into a sector like mobility, and they'll do mobility, and it'll be different aspects of mobility. It would be like, you know, ride hailing, and then robo-taxis, and then whatever, self-driving cars. To me, that's very boring, right? Like, because when I go into one of these areas, I learn everything about it. And part of the real rush for me is learning how these businesses operate that I had no idea they even existed, right? From the ground up. And each business, I think, takes a little bit of inspiration from the next. So you're certainly, like Halo had some inspiration from the technology and at eCourier. And then I would say that Dimble was pretty different, but also in a regulated industry, and, you know, had some ideas about how it could, you know, kind of create a better experience in that kind of regulated market. And then Andel is drawing on both of them, right? So it's a two-sided marketplace, plus it's got all these regulated components to it, and there's quasi-insurance, you know, elements to it, or at least the ability to know what insurance can't deliver. So,
Great. Okay. Yes.
What role does networking play in entrepreneurship, and how do you sort of build and sustain those long-term networks over the years?
yes. Okay, so this is a very good question. I am not very good at networking. I don't really like it. I don't have the patience for it. And so I'm probably the wrong person to ask, but I have definitely used it to my advantage in a lot of cases. So I think this becomes especially important as you get older, because the people that you went to college with are suddenly running healthcare at a major bank, right? And other kinds of things that can really kind of tip the scales and help you, and are happy to do it. I think maybe it depends on the business, but I think it's important. I would definitely do it if you're good at it. If you're not super good at it, I think the only thing that will be problematic for you is on the fundraising side, you really have to get warm introductions to all of these people. And some of your investors can probably help with that, the early investors. But if you're doing it from scratch, it may be more of a challenge. So when you're younger, I think it's a good idea to invest in.
Great. Yes.
Imagine you have a time machine and you can go back to the start with all this experience. You've got a great idea. What team do you assemble to make it most probable it's going to succeed?
So I think the question's impossible. And let me explain why. Why? Because if I did that, the team that I would want is the team that I have today at Andel. Why? Because they're people that I worked with before that I handpicked for various roles, or that I knew were going to be successful in the roles they were in. I couldn't possibly have known that if I didn't work with them before. So to say I would go back and pick a different team, they'd all be people I didn't know. And so I don't think, it would be a crapshoot. I'd be at a disadvantage, even knowing what I knew now. So that's why I think it's very important when you think about what roles you're going to fill in a business. Like, one of the first things that I think about is, okay, so who are we going to get to do product for this? This person has to basically understand the e-prescription network in the United States, knowing nothing about it, from scratch, right, within 3 months. And then they have to execute an engineering team that also doesn't know about it to do that. And then they've got to build an app on top of that and certain other things. And immediately I knew the answer to it. It's a person we're working with right now, Chris. But, that's just something that I think has to develop over time. Going out to find that person de novo, it's a lot of work, money, a lot of work and risk. Also, I would say the other reason this is important, when you're at the very early stages, you want people working for just equity, for free. It is almost impossible to convince somebody that you don't know to do that. Whereas it is extremely possible to convince somebody you've known for years and worked with on one or more businesses to drop what they're doing on the assumption that, hey, this could be really valuable for me and my career, and so I'm going to go and do this.
And maybe just following on from that, for those that aren't looking to build a business immediately, but maybe joining a business, I mean, all you hear at the moment is that kind of graduate roles are being taken over by AI, blah, 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 blah. Given all of that that's kind of being talked about at the moment, what's your advice on these guys that are about to graduate and are looking to get a role within a startup or a scale-up or some kind of role within the entrepreneurial arena, knowing the power of AI at those junior levels? What would you say to that? What are the skills that are so important in your mind now?
So look, we use AI. We have a ChatGPT enterprise or team subscription, but we mainly use it for like documents, right? We're going to summarize a long document, or I'm going to write an email that's really important. I want it double and triple checked in terms of, how clear it is. I think we're super well for that. Claude Code, I mean, the best there is definitely an infant. I mean, I use it for all of my kind of little projects, but I would never use it in production. And I think, look, there is a lot of slop that is created by AI in a variety of different ways. So I think it's not really about, I wouldn't go into it thinking, okay, I'm going to use AI in a business and that's going to get me the edge. I would go in a slightly different way and say, look, I can be a utility player. I can do whatever the business needs at any particular time. You want me to investigate a PEO organization so that we can have all of our employees on a health plan? I could do that. You want somebody that can basically write our HR manuals? I could do that. You want somebody that can write a product specification? I can work on that. But you just got to get in the door so that you can learn which area of the business that you like, and then double down on, hey, I love product. I got to learn from these product guys. I'm going to be on a product team. I'm going to be a product manager, and I'm going to be the best product manager that there is. and I'm going to grow my career for that. Or I'm going to start a business being the product guy.
Great. Yes.
As like early stages, how did you manage imposter syndrome?
Well, so, what do we define imposter syndrome as? Basically thinking that I can't possibly be as good as, or I can't be successful. It can't possibly be me. It's just not something that really enters my mind, not because I'm kind of crazy arrogant or anything like that, but, there is always self-doubt. There has to be. It's very healthy. What you're doing is impossible. I wake up in the morning having dreams where I'm talking to myself and saying, nobody will buy this product. I had it just the other day, I swear. It happens all the time. But, you just have to learn to figure out which of those are really just your inherent fears and you can dismiss them, and which of those are actually telling you something valuable that you might want to actually think about. I hope that answers the question. It's a great question.
I imagine some of that comes with experience, right? Maturity of having gone through these thoughts again and again and again, right? Yes, at the front.
Yeah, I want to go back to the idea of like asking whether customers want your product. So, what do you think is the most efficient way of accurate idea validation? Because and how do you know if people actually want it? Because you can talk to people and they're gonna say, "Oh, sure, I want to buy your product," but when you ask them, "Oh, take over your credit card now, I'm gonna sell it to you," and they're gonna be like, no, I actually don't want it. So yeah, how do you tackle that?
So I think there is a framework for customer discovery. I forgot who made it, but if you Google, it's a very senior, important product person of the past 30 years that came up with this customer discovery framework. So if you Google that, I think it's still as valid today as when it was written. But I think the idea is that you are actually talking to potential customers. So, consumers are one thing, right? But certainly if you're doing anything B2B or enterprise, you got to be talking to these people and you got to be saying, this is what I'm going to do. And if I did this, would it help you? Now, most people won't lie, right? Because they just have no reason to. You haven't given them anything. There's no incentive for them to say, yes, just for the heck of it. But if they do say yes, you can say, okay, how much would you pay for it? Then you get a better validation of what the answer is. With consumers, I think it's harder to do that because you don't know exactly too much about consumer behavior, but you can look at things like, what are they doing now? You can speak to people who are using the type of product that you want to use and ask them what features would be better or worse, or what do they pay for now, or how they're behaving, and get some kind of idea. But the bottom line is you want to present to them ideally some kind of like either prototype or sketch or something tangible that's like, here is my thing. And then you want people to say, I would buy this and I would pay XYZ to buy it. And I think that's, a beautiful thing. It's also very rare.
And yes, Olaf.
Thank you. Just a follow-up to that question. When that's happened for you in the past, what were the events that led up to that? And how many conversations were you expecting it, were you not? Just a little bit about that dynamic between you and the customer.
I mean, so by the time the first stage is you have to get the idea sufficiently formed that you can articulate it to somebody else. And ideally you can show it to them, like even if it's just a hand-drawn drawing or something like that. And then you get introduced to as many people as you possibly can, to be able to sense check it. I mean, it's kind of easy to know because if you're going for 5 people and 2 of them say, absolutely not, I pay nothing for this, and the others are kind of lukewarm, you kind of have your answer, right? What you want what you need is you need people to be emphatic about whatever it is, right? Ideally. That said, I will say this funny stories about the beginning of Andel. So I interviewed a lot of industry people, and these were not buyers of the product, but they were people in the industry that were kind of adjacent to what we were doing. And void, the amount of this is never going to work, like forget about it, that I got was astounding. But then I just ignored because they're not customers, right? Like, and also they have a vested interest as people in the business not to think about where the industry is really going. They're executing, the current conditions, and that works great for them. They're busy, they have businesses, etc. So anyway, so that's I think also a key difference.
Okay, next question. Yes, it's back.
Hi, thank you very much for coming today. I want to get your insight on premium models. When I talk to a lot of US investors, they feel like that's a thing of the past and then no longer works. But when I came here and talk to a lot of UK investors, they actually feel like that still works. They get added in advertised in it. What do you think?
What's a premium model?
Premium.
Oh, freemium model. Okay, freemium model. Okay. Yeah. So again, not an area that I've ever specifically built a business in. I don't love it, honestly, because my philosophy is if people are going to buy the product, they're going to buy the product. So you might as well give them not only a price, but also offer it at a generous high price, right? Like, well, because that's the thing, like you can always lower the price later, but you have to determine how people are going to react to this. So, freemium is sort of like a sales tactic later on to optimize conversion. I don't know that it's going to be great for, hey, look, this explains why this particular thing is going to work. I mean, some businesses, I guess, like, Lovable and those kind of businesses use it, quite a bit. But then again, they have massive churn. So I just don't know.
Thank you.
I guess attaching to that question of freemiums, what if the thing that you're trying to build is a social network that does utilize on that network of books, and so the best way to grow people in is having some sort of free or like incentive to do that.
Yeah. So I think that's fine. I think the litmus test there would be, I think you just got to build it. So how for how much money does it cost to build any sort of social network? And by the way, this could be the most bare bones, AI generated, whatever it is, app that's out there. It looks horrible, right? But it does the key functions that you think are important for this particular business model to be superior to all of the others that are out there. It has. And therefore, you're able to demonstrate some degree of user adoption and also user feedback. So people saying, you know what, it does this part really well, but I wish it did this and this and this, and then you can optimize from that. That's really the currency of those kind of products. But by the way, also, it would be better if you could somehow monetize them, because I think you're competing in a space where people are many, many times bigger than you with regard to ads. Unless it's a very specific verticalized social network, like for carpenters or something like that. You think you can do a better job?
Yes.
You talked about going into new industries and learning from scratch. I just wanted to ask, what is like your process into kind of figuring out the industry, how it works, and the problems that it faces?
Yeah. Well, so first I kind of stare into the abyss and think, okay, it could be a million different things, and what are we going to do? And then I start just like looking around at stuff. So in the case of Andel, I watched some congressional testimony where in the US, they were hauling all of the big pharma CEOs in front of Bernie Sanders to ask about why brand drug prices were so high. And then they had also the pharmacy benefit managers and everybody else, and they were all blaming each other, right, about this. And I looked at this and I thought, well, first of all, they can't all possibly be true, right? So there's got to be a better solution here. But also, like, the entire way in which these drugs are priced is so crazy. There should be, given this is an $850 billion market in America, growing by 10% a year, there should be a stock exchange, right? There should be a transparent, and liquid way for people to buy and sell and trade on these kind of drugs. The fact that we're very far from that seems problematic. Okay. And then it becomes, okay, so let's dig into what is a PBM? Why is that not working? Why is it working? What's been going on in that market lately? what's pharma think? Like, are they benefiting from all of this? Do they want to change? What's going on with regulation? And then after a while, you come up with a model, and the model is totally wrong. And then you pitch that a little bit, and then you get together and basically refine that model and say, no, we should involve the employers, as well. And then suddenly it seems like, wow, that's a really good idea. Maybe that's like even better than what we were thinking before. And so then you come up with something that you think is viable, and then you go and try and put the pieces together. Can we build the technology? Can we find a pharma partner or more? To be able to give us the drugs, like all the miracles that you have to put in place. Can you put them in place? And, we're still working on that now, but I hope early next year, we'll have some more to report there.
Yes.
Hi. So my question is, what I understand that you like the most is creating from scratch and like rebuilding something from scratch. Is having investors, people who in the end own a parts of what you're trying to create, some sort of can break a bit or slow down your motivation sometimes because you feel like you don't really own what you're gonna create anymore?
Look, I think it's a trade-off. So this business, I was fortunate to have some cash to fund it before anybody else did. So by the time we got to the investor phase, we already had some stuff in place. Maybe in a couple of years, I could have done it even more. And actually, I probably would, right? Because I'm not the kind of person that likes to invest in the stock market. I think it's too risky. I hate it, which sounds crazy, right? But no, I like the risk is in my day-to-day life, not there. I'm a bond person. And so that's kind of the way that I would describe it. But when it comes to investors and the idea of dilution, this is an exchange that you make in terms of more capital gets you to grow the business more easily, decrease the cash needs from you specifically, maybe even pay yourselves if you guys need or want to do that. These are all kind of necessary things. The question that you didn't ask, though, is it a venture fundable business, right? Because there are a lot of businesses that are great businesses, like spectacular businesses, but they really just aren't meant for venture capital. They can be venture funded, but when you do that, you wind up diluting yourself quite a bit and you don't get any of the upside. The reason you're doing that sort of dilution is because you think you can get 10, 20, 100x what you put into it. And at that level, dilution doesn't really matter anymore, right? Your ownership stake will take care of all that. So, and that's the way that I think that you have to think about it. It's the risk return ratio and what you have to put in.
Yes, right at the back, and then imposter syndrome, man.
You're a graduate and you're two opposite startups, one in Europe and one in the States. The one in the Europe has like some technology, really strong products, like good future, whereas the one in the States is a bit more risky. Kind of things don't seem like quite linear what's going on. Do you still recommend to go to the States? Or would you recommend to take risks to Europe?
Depends on what you want to achieve, right? So if you want to go work for a startup, if you want to go work for a startup, you want to work for the people and the organization that is going to train you best. There are some very good organizations over here. I mean, whatever I say. And so that this may very well be the best place for you to get to that next step. If you're involved in owning the business or running the business or building the business, then almost certainly the U.S. is better. And what I would say, which is you can always pivot and figure out all of those other things and be whatever you want to be, straighten them out, essentially.
If the long-term aim is to have your own startup grow, etc., would that change your decision?
I don't think so. I think people that have had, operating experience with the best people in Europe or the UK versus the best people in the US, I don't really think anybody cares. In most businesses, I just don't think there's a massive premium. The only thing you'll gain from being in the US in that case is probably more exposure to US investors and them having more exposure to you. So that may be something that should factor into your decision.
Yes.
So how much of your success do you attribute to luck and like the state of the market compared to the hard work that you do?
Yeah, I think it's 100% luck. I think what I mean by that is I have learned through 2001, 2008, whatever's going on now. I mean, the world is a unpredictable, crazy place. I mean, for no reason whatsoever and without warning, the macroeconomy goes crazy. Your particular sector might sour. A couple IPOs that have nothing to do with you and you're not planning to IPO for many, many years may go south, and suddenly nobody wants to invest in XYZ. And so that kills your market for a couple of years. So all these exogenous risks are always, kind of out there. The difference, though, is if you can build something that is as streamlined as possible, as hardened as possible, and, healthy, or as healthy as can be at any given time, and resilient, meaning that you're able to make the tough decisions about when your market folds. You might have to, get rid of half the staff. It happens all the time. The quicker you do it, generally, the better. But anyway, I think that's kind of what I would say is it's not luck, but it's the external environment is always there and always a factor you can't control. You become much more comfortable after a while with the fact that you can't control it, and you just try and accept that that's something that you have to factor into all of your calculations as you're building the business.
Great. Yes.
We know that AI and technology is growing. So what type of industries do you think that are growing and are hot and is a good opportunity to go in?
Do you mean with regard to AI or just generally? God. The problem with that statement is I look at the AI marketplace and I look at what's going on in venture capital in America. Like 70% of the U.S. Venture capital is going to AI. I don't know what it is exactly. It's crazy numbers. Whatever you're thinking of, there's 10 people thinking of it already. And that's not a super great position to be in, especially when a lot of these AI startups are very capital intensive, right? The reason they raised $200 million isn't because they just want to use it for expansion. It's because they have to buy the chips or buy the tokens or whatever it is. And it's very, very expensive. So that money goes out the door really, really quickly. The other problems is that a lot of them are built on the backs of other AI startups. And should they raise their prices? Should they have issues? Then they're really, kind of in trouble. So I don't know, but I would say that I would look more carefully at businesses that were trying to help other businesses profitably use AI. Not necessarily a consulting way, but some way that gets around this fact that most businesses that use it don't seem to get their money back. The kind of picks and shovels approach, rather than, hey, we're going to do a new model or something like that, which I think is going to be a tall order.
Yes. Can you talk about, for example, how you grow your startup, and is there any lessons learned from this process?
Yeah, sure. Well, so I'm fortunate in that through my career, the different businesses had different growth models. So eCourier was a sales-driven business-to-business, environment, mainly selling to mid-sized or enterprises, right? That was very tough. I mean, that was walking around to the mailrooms of all of the big companies and meeting the heads, and taking them out and whatever. So that was kind of one area. It's not very scalable, and it's a lot of work. Halo was 100%, consumer marketing, but the best marketing that it ever did was the sort of B2B2C marketing, right? Where the taxi drivers would put the promo codes in their taxis for free to encourage the people that weren't yet using the app to download it. That was extremely effective. And so those kind of things I think work very well. We also use and everybody at that time did. Everybody used, Facebook, and they used Google, and they used Twitter. But Twitter was not monetizing, so all of the ads were free, basically. Meta was not advertising at that time. So you got all these things for free. Nowadays, forget it. It would be crazy expensive. You can never do it. It wouldn't be profitable for you to even try. So I've kind of learned that those platforms are no longer viable for pretty much any startup, with rare exceptions. And then, Andel is really about selling to pharma companies, which is, again, more like the direct enterprise sales, except the mailroom managers have been replaced by very senior market access executives, but same concepts. And then also, selling to basically plans or employer groups, etc. And I think, that's a process that is also very similar to the enterprise side on most cases, but there are some smaller employers we think about, like, do we really need to sell to you, or can we have a process that you come to us and, kind of triage yourself, and then we'll give you a plan, and we'll give you instructions, and we'll set you up, etc., like an express version. We haven't done that yet, but we think about that. And then the employees, it's about the employers marketing to the employees as part of the agreement and the process. That's a lot like the taxi drivers, in my view, marketing to the consumers that are in the back of the taxi. Let's hope.
Yes.
Yeah. May you kindly explain us, please, how is the step by step of how you run the application with the taxes? Because the idea came to your mind. Now you say, okay, I don't know how to create platforms. So you learn how to create platforms, or you hire a person, and then how is the accountability, the laws, are they right?
Yeah.
Send the idea, the test host.
So this goes back to the question that was asked about the time machine. When there were many people that left eCourier, taking only memories, and wanting to do other things. It just so happened that I managed to figure out something that I thought they could be very well used doing. And so, although there was nothing specific that they took from the eCourier technology, they understood GPS, they understood mobile, they understood real-time analytics, they understood real-time auto allocation, and all of these concepts that you need in an automated taxi app. Very few people at that time really understood that. So I had them. We had them, and they were great. And so they developed a team around that. And some of them had gone on to create very big and influential businesses themselves.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I will let you to move to another type of businesses, because in this case, it's a platform. So we have to develop platform, etc. But what about another type of businesses? For example, let's see something. Let's see a vape that help you with white teeth, for example. But we don't know how to create vapes to smoking. We don't know how is the whitening process in the teeth. But we want to create a vape that help your teeth, for example. So how we can go to that business that we don't know how to merge two different products?
So maybe it's the accent, but I just didn't get what it was.
The vape that whitens your teeth. Is it a vape?
It was an example. It's like,
Yeah.
we can think about a very innovative product.
Yeah.
Cheese, the example that I just say, a vape that helps to your teeth, or a cigarette that helps to your teeth. For example, we don't know the tobacco industry. We don't know how is the help on the teeth, and yet no alcohol. So how we can imagine those markets that we don't know how work.
So the first thing I would do is I would do as much research as I could on teeth whitening alternatives, because ultimately, if that's what you're selling is teeth whitening, then you want to know every consumer, when they go to search for teeth whitening, what are the alternatives? What are the prices? What are the processes? Do they, they could obviously get crowns and veneers. That's one end of it. They could also basically do, dentist whitening. They could do, I'm sure they sell a gazillion types of whitening over the internet. I don't know exactly too much about the market. But then you have to ask yourselves, how big is that market, and how can you really differentiate? And if the answer is, well, the market's not that big, and we don't think we can actually make that much of an impact because people are still going to buy all of the other things, then maybe that's not something that is worthy of too much additional brain power. Those businesses, by the way, are incredibly hard to do in a venture funded environment because the marketing is severe, right? Like there's already entrenched channels, and it's just probably not that profitable, right? Like you're not making the stuff. So you've got to buy it from somebody else. And what's the markup that you can really do? It's very price sensitive. So you got to sell a gazillion of them to make a really big business. So anyway, that's the way I would frame something like that. But I'm not an expert.
You okay for another 2 questions? Selps?
You sort of looked at if this is going to work in the UK. Well, your market's not big enough based on the numbers you're looking for. Would you go to the US to see if the same product will work there and then run the same sort of analysis to see if people are going to buy it?
Well, I would actually run the analysis in the US first. And the reason why is if it really is an innovative venture backable product, somebody in the US is going to figure it out and somebody's going to get backed for it. And then you're going to be in a position where you had a monster in the US that's growing like crazy because it's got this big homogeneous market. And it's like, I won't say ugly duckling, but it's what came to mind. So, in the UK, that basically isn't as big and you got limited options and you could grow into Europe. Yeah, sure, you could do that, but you got to do like 20 languages and, it's not that homogenized between the UK and the rest of Europe now. So it's not spreading is not as easily. So anyway, so I would look in the US first because you'd see, is anybody doing it? How big is the market? And can we actually make it work there? And then I would see, yes, given the choice of starting it in various locations, what is optimal from a business perspective? And then, of course, you got to bring your lives into it. Can you move your family? All this other stuff. I totally understand that's a consideration, but you have to do that homework first, no matter what.
Can I follow up?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like the UK is getting a bit of a bad rap tonight. So given that you can't go to the US for whatever reason, can you tell me 3 things that you love about the UK?
I can, but I'm just trying to think of all.
That is out in the video.
All 3. I really do love London. I have to say, I think the vibe of London is very different than New York. Every time I come here, I get reverse homesick and I want to stay. And there's just something about the place and how it's developed, even in the last 10 or 20 years with a gazillion massive buildings and East London becoming so bad, going from being so bad when I first got there that the government was giving us money to put our office in the E1 postcode to now, for the love of money, you could never get anything really there. So that's certainly one thing. I think the quality, and this is not just because we had one of them in the room, but yes, there are less venture capitalists here, but I think the quality of some of the venture capital here is absolutely top rate, on par with the US, or maybe even better in some respects. So you have, even if you don't have as many of them, you certainly have the kind of best of the best. And look, I'm going to say one other thing, which is a backhanded compliment. You got less competition because there are just less people in the UK, in my experience, that want to actually start businesses. So if you are going to be the ones to do it, you have a tactical advantage over all of those people. Whereas in the US, you are dealing with a market where you have many, many people who want to do that. And if you can create a foothold here, then who knows? I mean, Spotify did a fantastic job, right, in doing this. There's probably a couple others that I haven't thought of, but.
Great. That's very kind. Thank you. Yeah. We've got time for maybe 2 more questions. You can probably also see a teeth whitening vape unicorn about to happen in the UK as well. So watch this space. Yes, at the back.
I have a question regarding investors, fundings. I feel like investors in the Valley tends to have a firm mentality in the sense that the initial investment is really hard, but once you get your first big break, all the investors come pouring in. How did you manage to break through that initial hurdle? And helped you, best recommended you?
Okay, so this is not just true in the Valley. This is true in New York. This is true in Florida. This is true in London. This is true in Stockholm and everywhere else. It's the nature of the business that basically there really aren't a lot of front runners, in the market, at least not anymore. I mean, you look at what's going on in AI, and most of the money going in AI, they're all following each other to these deals, which is why they're going the way they are. So it's not personal. It's just the nature of the way that business works. The good news, though, as you said, is if you do break through the initial and become one of those, and the herd is coming, you can really make hay while the sun shines. So how do you do that? Look, you've got to do it step by step. You have to basically assume that you are going to have to fight so hard to get your first couple of $1 million. You have to be humble enough to know that if you want $5 million, but the market is only giving you 2, that you should take the 2 after a certain period of time, right? Close it, and then basically do another round and do another round. Like you just have to react to the way the market is, what the market is telling you at any one time. And then once you get things like, your product live in the marketplace, people will respond. I don't, from my perspective, like, I'm practically drowning in VC introductions, like 5 a week. The other good thing about that, by the way, is it's not just wasted time to talk to them. They will legitimately, some of them that are very interested in your deal will do things for you and help you. They will give you introductions. They will give you lots of other, key strategic things because they want to be seen to be doing helpful things for you. That way you remember that during the deal. So you should definitely take advantage of that if you become so lucky.
Got it. Yeah, going back to what you just said about like you get smaller rounds, sort of like 2, and then you try to raise a bit. How do you manage that in like a top market to like build up the money? Your also shares sort of with the.
Look, again, it's sort of doing what the market will bear, right? So if you have commitments for 1.5, most likely you can go out there and find somebody else who's going to fill the round at 2 million. If you have commitments for 1.5 and you go out to the market saying you want to raise 5, people are going to look back at you and say, well, I mean, they're never going to get there. So like, I don't know what I'm not going to do. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait till the next round, blah, blah, blah. So if you need the money, which most people do in that situation, you have to close something. So you should be sprinting to the finish. You should be talking to everybody. Yes, people talk to each other in this market, but it doesn't really matter. There's so many different investors at the seed stage, particularly, that basically are all looking for you. You've never had an opportunity to meet them yet. So you should absolutely bottom out that process, but with the knowledge that at certain points you may have to kind of dial it back a little bit. So when they ask, what are you raising? You say, oh, well, we're raising between, 2 and 4. Okay. Now it doesn't look so bad for you to raise the 2. But if there was more available, you get it. I would also always recommend giving a range when it comes to the early stage, because you just never know what's going to happen.
Was fundraising for Andel easier compared to your other ventures, considering all of your experience into that point?
I think the seed rounds are always so tough. I mean, I really do. I mean, everyone was difficult in its own way. The result of it was excellent. We got great investors and we got a great price and everything else. But, I mean, it was tough, because I think when you're doing something that is, if we had slapped like, hey, we're doing an AI for XYZ, I would have been in here saying I raised $50 million. You would, no issue. I'm serious. But because we're doing true business model innovation, which unfortunately is kind of rare nowadays, I think that actually makes it a lot harder for you, because now you've got to find somebody who is interested in your sector, understands it intimately enough, agrees with your view of where things are going in the world, and invests at the seed stage. And that's just can be a tough combination. So anyway, I think we had to go through, I wouldn't say it was an excruciating process, but I would say that it was like a we went through a normal process, probably in my experience, to get to the end, but it finished very, very strong.
Yeah. So how do you deal with rejection? Seems like you must have a big muscle for it.
It sucks. I mean, it just sucks. You go in there and you spend so much time building this deck and this vision of how you think the world is going to evolve, and you go in there and you pitch it with all your heart and soul, and you get like, well, we'll get back to you, and they never do. Like half of these, I can't believe it. Even as you get more, kind of senior in the world, the amount of the VCs, even well-known, well-established ones, that just did not get back with any feedback, even after us asking them, I thought was astonishing, which just goes to show you a little bit again about the state of the industry. The fact is that this is, again, a market. And in a market, you can expect that you will not hit the jackpot right away. In fact, you can pretty much guarantee that on the first 5 people you go to, at least 4, if not 5, will say no flat out. But that's not what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get as much information as you can from those first 5 people, and then the 10 people after that, and the 20 people after that, so that you know what people are thinking about, what questions they're asking, what's not clear, etc., so that the deck is improving every single pitch. So by the time you get to number 25 and 50 and whatever it is, you've got it down. You got that question? I got a slide for that question here. Whatever it is, that you've got pretty much an answer for it. And even if you don't, at least you are presenting something that they totally get it, they understand, but they're saying no because they just won't do it for some reason, and that's okay. Move on to the next one. Also, there's a lot of qualification stuff that I think you should do. A lot more people should do this if you can. When you're speaking to investors, you got to ask them what their sweet spot investment size is. Do they have any valuation constraints, ownership constraints, etc.? And if they're completely out of whack with what you're doing, it's just not worth having the meeting, or not worth continuing the meeting, unless there's something that you can do in the future.
Just quick follow-up then. So how do you pick the first 5 investors? Do you strategize around picking who to pick? Pick ones where you don't care if they say no?
Yeah, well, so that is a very good. Ideally, yes, you should do that. I guess I did similar, but I mean, I just went to the people that on my list that I've got. Who are the first kind of 5 that came to mind, but not the ones that I guess I cared more about. And then they all passed. so anyway, in fact, I would say the first 10 probably did. After that, you start to worry, and you're like, wait a minute, if it is something like, but again, it's a market. You have to have faith that you just have not connected with the right counterparty yet.
My question is, like, when you started from scratch with very limited resources, how do you identify your competitive edge that makes you confident that your business would have a great potential in the market?
Yeah, it's a great question. What do you do when you don't have a lot of resources and you're trying to prove to somebody that your idea works or could be big? So number one is research. So the amount of research you have to become and come across as an expert. They ask you questions. It is like they're talking to a PhD in whatever you are doing, right? Because people love to invest in experts. They want somebody much smarter than them in this whatever particular domain it is. So that's one thing that you can do on your own. You can have spoken to people. You can have advisors. You do a lot of things actually with not a lot of money. But the main thing is you can basically say, hey, look, you create a really compelling deck and say, here's our story. Here's how we think the market is going to evolve, and here's why. Here's our solution. Here's what we've done so far, and here's what we're going to do with the money. There's a gazillion, really good resources out there on how to do that. But what distinguishes it from me when I see some deals is the quality of the deck is generally means that if the quality is much higher, it generally means the company has really spent their time and energy refining, speaking to people, researching, and everything else. And that comes through, really quickly. It doesn't mean you're going to get the deal, but it means you'd have much better odds.
Okay, no final questions?
Oh, we'll go on.
Lost. You talk about the product sort of companies now, but if you want to raise money for a service-based company, how would you do it? Because VCs typically do not invest in service-based company.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so if I just look at this, eCourier was a service-based business, right? It's a technology-enabled service for courier services. Halo was a two-sided marketplace for taxi services, so there's taxi services in there. Thimble was an insurance MGA, so an insurance service. So I guess all I've done is services business. I've never done a product business. So I think but I think the question you're asking may be something quite different, which is why will people not invest in non-technology enabled product businesses as opposed to technology enabled product businesses? And the reason I think is that there is less venture capital accelerant to be used in those kind of businesses. Like, yes, there's some capital that you can get that can make it better, but can the technology, can it really be something that a VC can help you with? Mega scaling, getting better analytics in. I don't know. It seems like the kind of business where it's all about volume, and that's basically the whole business, and that's just not attractive. The other problem is if you've got to make the product. I think a lot of VCs have been snake bitten by products that just don't work, and therefore it's over. But it's not impossible. I mean, the Oura Ring is one example of, I think, something that is like borderline a product. It's also a service because it's got the technology to it, but it's sort of, it's got a little bit of both. I think it's a phenomenal product.
Okay. I think we might have exhausted everyone. Brilliant. Okay, well, just before we go over to the networking, as you know, networking is super important. You're going to fail if you don't network tonight, so get over to the crisps and the wine and do your thing. But I just wanted to say a massive thank you to Jay. I've seen people furiously scribbling. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, really, really fascinating, really clear as well in your answers. And I think Jeff will be proud. Thanks, Jeff, for watching. And thank you, all of you, for listening in. We're going to be open for another 45 minutes, hour or something like that. And I wish you all the best. Thank you very much. I do have to, I think Sean's asked me to say something about a QR code.